My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. The mid to late 1980s were a major turning point in my life. Corresponding to my mid to late 30s, a series of synchronicities reopened a dormant spiritual path, a path that had been asleep since my early teens. Grounded in science and logic, my worldview started shifting as I explored spirituality amidst the burgeoning New Age and New Thought movements. I was simultaneously thrilled and shaken as this transformation unfolded, later finding that there were millions having the same experience. My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Betsy Chasse, experienced something similar as co-writer, director, and producer of the 2004 hit indie film, What the Bleep Do We Know? Betsy Chasse is an award-winning filmmaker and best-selling author. She also produced Song of the New Earth, Radical Dating, and Pregnant in America. Her books include Tipping Sacred Cows and Metanoia, a transformational change of heart. She's the head of content for See Good TV, a conscious media platform, and has written for several national magazines. Her website is betsychasse.net, and she joins me this week to share her path and her just published novel that she describes as a somewhat true story about what happens when the least spiritual woman on the planet gets hired to make a movie about New Age spirituality. The title of her book, Killing Buddha: The Truth Shall Set You Free, but first it will make you miserable. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Betsy Chasse. Welcome, Betsy.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here.
And thank you so much for joining us, because I think this work is something that our audience will really resonate with. So please share with our listeners your early path and how it led to your career as an author and filmmaker.
Well, we're going to talk about one of these books later, but my path into filmmaking came the moment I was born. Apparently, my birth was filmed for a documentary series on natural childbirth. And from that moment, I was the stunt baby because they had followed another woman through her entire pregnancy. And at the very last moment, she needed a C-section. And I was baby number 6 for my mom. And even though I was a preemie, she said, come on in, gentlemen, film me giving birth if that's what you need. And they pretended I was the other baby. And boom, there you go. That's how it all started.
So you were born for the industry.
I was born to make films, and as a child, I was a child actress for most of my, early years of my life. So I was literally born on camera and in it for a very long time. And I've never really left, I guess.
What were some of the other things that you did when you were younger?
God, I was like a Barbie Mattel girl for a long time. I mean, if you're in your 50s, then you saw me, or 60s. You saw me if you were watching those morning cartoons. You saw me in the Mattel commercials, McDonald's commercials, car commercials, granola bar commercials, you name it. I was a pretty successful commercial actress. I did a lot of TV too, but at those days, my agent was like, "Why push her into TV when she's doing so well in commercials?" But I did like Silver Spoons and Who's the Boss and Charles in Charge and all those shows.
Wonderful. I've watched some of your recent interviews and appearances, and you have an awesome sense of humor. Has that always been one of your gifts?
I guess so. I'm not sure. I mean, my parents were probably funny, but, I think I like to laugh. And for me, it isn't so much a deflection or a tool to avoid my feelings, because I feel pretty strongly. But I think, at this point, I've always had this sort of mentality, like, you got to laugh at life. Like, you just have to laugh, because also it's like the greatest drug known to man. If you laugh, your body gets like bathed in awesome chemicals and it feels good. So I just enjoy laughter.
And I see that some of your laughter and some of your humor is sarcastic and actually biting.
A little bit, yeah. One would agree with that. I'm a direct person, and I think most of the people that know me really well would know that my intention is always good. But yes, I do have a little bit of sarcasm.
Wonderful.
A little bit, just a small amount.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
So you were born into filmmaking, but how did you get in behind the camera?
I was 16 years old and I realized that I wasn't a very good actress, and I was just cute when I was little, had great teeth and a smile. And I had spent my entire life on film sets and in the theater, and decided that I was going to transform myself from a bad actress, because by the time you're 16, you're kind of not cute enough to do commercials anymore. And I wasn't getting any TV shows or series. So I just decided to move behind the camera, and it just made perfect sense to me. It's always, for me, filmmaking and storytelling has always just been what I was supposed to do.
What were some of your early films, and how did they shape your path?
Well, I might shock your listeners here, but I did a lot of early filmmaking in porn. Straight up. There you go. I worked for Playboy. I did a lot of softcore porn. I did, I love to say that I was one of the producers on one of the very first spiritual porns. I sent two very famous film stars on a spiritual quest. So, I was trying to bring spirituality into all different types of mediums. But yeah, and then I did big movies like Kindergarten Cop and The Player. I had a very varied career. And for a long time, I was very young. I was very driven. A lot of this is talked about in the book Killing Buddha, which is a novel, but it's very much based on my life. And the main character in the book, produces softcore porn. That character of Sarah is very much my life. And, but I started doing big movies, and then I wanted to take a step up in the kind of job that I was doing. And back in those days, there weren't a lot of women that were producers or line producers or production managers. And I was really driven. And so in order to kind of get the bigger credit, I had to go to places where they wanted me.
Absolutely. You were a pioneer then in terms of women in film, weren't you?
Well, I wouldn't say that I was a pioneer. There was a lot of amazing women that did some amazing stuff. But yeah, I think one of the cool things that happened to me was with Playboy is Christy Hefner had taken over running porn, by the way, is always on the cutting edge of technology. And Playboy Channel was one of the very first cable networks to really understand that they had to create original programming, that they had to develop their content for their audience. They were very, very strategic and very smart. And Christy came over to run that. And one of her mandates was that she wanted more women in the roles of producer, director. She didn't just want to see women naked on the front of the screen. She wanted to see women behind the camera. And I was lucky enough to benefit from that mandate, in that when I was 22 years old, I started my first production company and started producing original content for Playboy at a time when probably not a lot of women owned their own production companies. Wonderful.
What were some of your favorite films?
Oh my gosh. I have to say that I can't pick a favorite. I loved making movies. And it's interesting because I talk about this story in the book from the character's perspective. I didn't go to college. I literally I took the GED, finished school when I was 17 because I had been homeschooled most of my life, and just started working in film. And I loved it. I loved it. My whole life had been being on a set. The cool thing about filmmaking, you go to a new place every day. You see costumes, and you get to visit different times and places and experiences. And it's a challenge. Producing a movie is akin to running a country. There's a banking system, a food system, a transportation system. So it's an exciting world. And it's interesting because I had decided when I was younger, that I was going to run a studio, and that even though I never went to college, that, part of the requirement, when they give you the job description is, BA or master's or whatever. Right. And I didn't have any of that, but I just said, I'm going to run a studio. And so I do this for years, from the time I was probably 17 till about 26 7 years old, I worked my way all the way up to senior vice president of production at a production company. And I got headhunted for a major studio to be director of production. And I thought, this is it. I've done it. Because director of production is 3 steps away from president of production, right? I thought, okay, I've done it. And I remember going to do the final interview, they were going to show me my office and all the exciting stuff, So I pull up, I go to like the 30th floor of this office building, and I'm afraid of heights. And, I walk into this new office that's going to be mine, and the office has floor to ceiling windows on 2 sides. And I thought I was going to die and vomit, because I'm like, I can't sit in this office every day and looking out into the sky. Like, this is insane. And as I was riding down the elevator, I had this moment, which it took me a long time to really like grok what was going on with me. But what I realized is that I was being up on the 30th floor. I was the farthest away I was ever going to be from what I truly loved, which was the grit and the chaos and the excitement of film making, which is down on the ground in the trenches. So it's hard for me to pick one, because on any given day, it was pure joy or pure chaos, but it was just the pleasure of and the gratitude of getting to do that every day as a job.
It's not the destination, it's the journey.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wonderful. Now, you had some significant changes in your life prior to What the Bleep came.
Yeah. Well, so after that day, right after that day, I rode down to the elevator and I realized that I was lost. Again, at that time in my life, I had not ever done anything about spiritualities. Like, the most religious thing I did was shoe shopping at that point in my life. I call it my shoe consciousness period. And so I again, some of this is probably comes from later reflection on looking back, but I realized that I lost the love of what I was doing. And so I decided to quit making films. And everybody thought that I literally went insane. They thought she's lost her mind, because I had a great career. And I quit and I started a company that made gourmet dog treats out of my kitchen. And then I did that for a few years, and that kind of the .com bubble burst and, went broke. And at that time, I was kind of lost about what I was supposed to do. And my agent took me to a yoga class and basically said, you need to do something, girl. You're out of your mind. You don't know what you're doing. You're lost in your life. And in that yoga class, the teacher said, make a list of what you really want in your life and then, meditate on it. And I didn't know how to meditate. And this was back in the day. Remember when the Center for Spiritual Living, no, not Center for Spiritual Living, Paramahansa Yogananda, they would have that written newsletter. My agent sent me one, and it was how to meditate. And it was all written down. And I was sitting there trying to read how to meditate and meditate at the same time. And I made my list. And on it, I said, I want to make a movie that has an impact on the world. I want to get out of debt. I want to move out of LA, and I want to find my soulmate. And I call it beginner's luck, but within about 4 days, all of those things happened, because Mark had come to me. Mark Vicente is the other filmmaker on The Bleep, and said, I've got this movie. At the time, it was called Sacred Science. It wasn't anywhere near what The Bleep turned out to be. And he said, we need a producer. We need someone who can help us with this movie. And I took it, and the rest is history.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So you had really no sense of spirituality other than, as you say, the shoes before What the Bleep.
Nope. I didn't. And I think that's kind of the beauty of What the Bleep. And I think if, I look at it now and I go, there were 3 filmmakers on The Bleep. There was myself, William Arntz, and Mark Vicente. William was the physicist and the scientist and the financier. Mark had done a lot of the sort of more woo-woo, emotional, spiritual work. And I was this newbie who had no idea what anybody was talking about. The joke is, the reason the movie's called What the Bleep Do We Know is I literally would say that all the time. I'd go, what the do I know about what you guys are talking about? And so that just became our working title for the new version of the movie, and it sort of stuck. But I think because we all came at the information, first of all, authentically and genuinely interested, but from a different perspective on it. That's why the film did so well and works. It's not only is it 3 movies animated, narrative, and the documentary all combined. But it's got 3 levels of awareness going on throughout the entire film. So people can really watch that movie at any level and they're going to grab something that's specific for them.
For the few of our listeners who have never seen the movie, give them a brief synopsis. Tell them about the cast.
So the film stars Marlee Matlin as a photographer who is going through a life crisis. And what we do is we combine animation, interviews with some of the leading, at the time, scientists, philosophers, and New Age leaders, and a narrative story in which Marlee stars, into a journey that really explores how your thoughts affect your reality and what does science tell us about the world that we live in and how can we exist in it in a state of happiness.
And how did working with so many distinguished scientists and New Thought leaders affect you?
Wow, that's a big question because it completely changed my entire worldview. Remember, I was driving my BMW and wearing, cute shoes for most of my life. And interestingly enough, when I was 8 years old, my dad gave me a copy of the book, The Art of War. And my father was, he did a lot of interesting things, but one of the things that he did was he was a band leader or a choir leader for multiple churches. And so I went with him pretty much from Saturday to Sunday, every weekend, to a Christian church, like Baptist, a synagogue, Catholic churches, like all these different churches, because he would go and do music for them. And I remember having this conversation with him once and saying, Dad, I don't understand why there were all these different churches, because they're all kind of saying the same thing, aren't they really? And he said, well, one day I think you'll figure it out. And I said, okay. And I thought, I kind of dabbled in religion and spirituality a little bit, but I thought this is just ridiculous. And so I just got grounded, and none of this is real. None of this is true. So to go from producing porn and wearing cute shoes to just having it's not every day that you get to sit in a room with some of the greatest minds in spiritual and or science and ask questions. So I guess I needed that kind of experience to really offer me the information, data, and wisdom that I needed to really open up to what all this stuff is really about. So, I mean, it literally changed everything about me.
Give me a couple of examples. What did it change?
Well, it certainly opened up you have 2 ways of thinking. It's either this is the way it is, I can't change it, there's nothing out there, there's no God, there's no nothing, this is life and it's over. 2, I have the power to create my reality. So before I could say that, at least not consciously, I was a very driven person. So I think that I was organically operating from the place of I create my reality, but I didn't really understand that concept, that how I think and shifts my perspective. And when you have a wider perspective, you see more. I mean, in the Bleep, I think it's Amakaswamy talks about the sea of potentials, right? I didn't really have any idea what that meant. Whereas now I sit down, it just was what it was. There were no other potentials, right? Whatever I thought it was, that's what it was. Now I can sit down and go, I could see it that way. What are other ways? What are other possibilities that are out there that I could choose as opposed to what I'm choosing right now? Is there another way to see this? And in seeing it differently, does that open up to a new experience around it? I think that's probably the biggest aha for me, was that I'm in the driver's seat of choosing my experience as opposed to just experiencing and reacting.
So you went from producing softcore porn and wearing cute shoes to making gluten-free gourmet dog treats. What expectations do people have of you after the success of What's the Bleep?
Well, the funny thing is, and even to this day I laugh, after the Bleep came out, Will, Mark, and I were somehow considered these spiritual ninja rock stars. And we were I opened for Deepak in a 1,000-person room, and people were interested in my thoughts on spirituality. And it always made me giggle because I was like, I don't know. I still don't know. Like, you're asking me? And I just made a movie about it. That doesn't mean I know any of this. So I think that people, and for a while, I'll be really honest, I kind of dug that. I have to say, I thought it was special. Here I am, telling people that if they think this way, their lives are going to be perfect. And, it was like, I think it was a perfect, and a lot of people will share when they have their spiritual journeys, that moment when you get super comfortable and super arrogant and super on top of the world about it all, it's the sure sign that something's about to pop. Well, for me, I had 6 or 7 years after the bleep, I had children and had a great house, and I was this amazing spiritual rock star. And then I got divorced, lost everything, and my whole entire life came crashing to the ground, which is where I found writing the books that I've been writing. That's where all of this new part of my life came from. Because before that, I was a filmmaker. I mean, and I'm still a filmmaker, but now I consider myself more of a writer.
And we're talking about her just published book, Killing Buddha, The Truth Shall Set You Free, but first it will make you miserable. Betsy Chasse, please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out more about you, your work, your movies, and everything that you do.
Well, they can go to betsychasse.net. They can go to the letter C, good.tv. And they can just Google Betsy Chasse and they'll find my books are available in bookstores and all over the place.
And that's spelled BetsyChasse. We'll be back with more of Betsy after these words on the OMTimes radio network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Know that feeling? Like every door is closing and you just can't see a way out? Being unemployed, underemployed, or just out of school can feel like that. But when you find the right tools, suddenly everything just clicks. FindSomethingNew.org offers resources that help develop new skills that can position you for careers in today's growing industries, from healthcare and manufacturing to cybersecurity and alternative energy. Find your path to a new career at FindSomethingNew.org. A message from the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Betsy Chasse. We're talking about her new book, Killing Buddha. Betsy, one of the pitfalls that many who aspire to a spiritual path is the dichotomy between energy and money, the equivalence. Why do you think this is so difficult for so many?
Gosh, you ask deep questions. We don't have a lot of time, but here's my short answer. I think that people have problems with money because we live in a society that has put money as the end-all, be-all barometer for success. So money has been given more power and over us in determining everything about our lives than happiness or peace or love has. So I think we build up a resentment to it. And I find it interesting in a lot of the New Age, New Thought world, money is often bad. It's been, greed is bad, right? And it is bad, but it's almost become a sin or a no-no to say, I want to be rich. And to share, like my daughter, she's going to be 17. Since she was a little kid, she's always talked about being rich. I'm going to be rich one day. I'm going to be super rich. And it's interesting. There have been people who've said, well, gosh, you might want to talk to her about that. Maybe and I looked at them and said, no, if that's what she wants, that's what she should get. And she should never be guilted about it, because I know her heart. And if she's rich, she's going to do good things with that money. Whereas, if I didn't work with her on what are her values and her ethics, and then I shamed her about money, who knows what she would do? And I think a lot of it comes from guilt and shame around wanting success, and then the story that we've been told around money.
Absolutely. So how did you come up with the title for Killing Buddha?
So Killing Buddha comes from a very ancient Zen koan written by a master named Linji, who is Chinese. And Linji was not very popular in the Buddhist world. He's considered a rebel and a troublemaker. But somebody read this quote to me, right around the time, sometime after Bleep came out. And this tends to happen to me. I'll hear something and it really sticks with you. You have to think about it for a long time. And I really thought about it because I had struggled a lot with the concept of non-attachment in Buddhism. And I thought, what does that mean, non-attachment? Like, I can't not be attached to my kids. But it's so unrealistic. And I really struggled with that idea. And when I heard that saying, it's basically embrace nothing, live your life as it is. If you meet the Buddha along the road, kill him or you'll fall in the rest of your life. It taught me that really non-attachment was about being present and being grateful for what you have, loving it there, but also understanding that in a moment or two, things are going to be different, and to be in love with that moment as well. And we tend to grab onto things and hold on to them as isms. And when we get stuck in the isms, we can't evolve. We can't grow. So you're in a relationship and that relationship's no longer working, but that's your relationship. So you don't let go of it. You want to be, the idea is kill the Buddha. That's your guru. That's your teacher. Everything they say comes and goes, but there's going to come a moment when that is no longer your teacher or your pathway, and you have to be willing to say thank you and move on. And so Buddha is a sort of like metaphor for things in your life that you're holding on to. And a lot of my work really relates to that. Tipping Sacred Cows talks about the things that we hold, beliefs that we hold dear. Metanoia is a book about transforming. And now I have this new quote that I love. It's from Jack Kerouac. It says, be in love with your life, every detail of it. So it's really, so for me, I always one thing I happen to be good at is titles. What the bleep do we know? I'm pretty good at that. And I just came up with Killing Buddha, Kill Your Buddhas, and there you go.
Has anyone been taken aback by the title?
People have been taken aback by the title, and most of the people that get taken aback by the title are people that don't know the quote. And it's funny because most Buddhists are not offended by the title. Absolutely. And I actually had a moment recently where somebody said that I was guilty of cultural appropriation because I put a Buddha on the cover of my book. And I really thought about that. It's a sensitive time. I know that people are really sensitive about things, but cultural appropriation is when you take something from a different culture, you don't honor that culture, you don't credit that culture, and then you transform it or don't respect it. And my entire book is an homage to the idea of this Linji quote. And I specifically used the Laughing Buddha because he's also Chinese, because Laughing Buddha is also a bit of a rebel in Buddhist culture. And the interesting thing is Buddhism has been overly culturally appropriated because it started in India, but now it's all over in many different forms and in many different countries. And so if we want to talk about cultural appropriation, only people from Bihar, India should be talking about Buddhism. But that surprised me. But other than that, I think most people get it. And I think most people want to laugh right now. We talked about laughing before. And I think people are ready to take some of these deep spiritual concepts and have a little fun as they explore them.
Absolutely. I remember going to a Zen monastery in the late 1980s, early 1990s with my dear friend yoga teacher and several of our friends. And at the Zen monastery, we were learning from the monks not to take things too seriously. And one of our friends was a chocolatier and said, "Can I make chocolate Buddha Pops?" And they said, "Absolutely, we'd love them." And so they enjoyed the chocolate Buddha Pops while watching Star Trek when they weren't doing their tasks as monks and nuns in the monastery. So absolutely, you're 100% right.
Well, I think people have to remember too that Buddhism is not a religion, technically. Buddhism is a philosophy,
Right.
and that's one of the things. You can be a Buddhist and still be a Christian.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a lot of friends who are Buddhist and Jewish. They call themselves Bujus.
There you go.
And Hindus and Jewish Hindus. So there's a lot of, in the interfaith field that I'm in, there are so many variations and so many wonderful combinations of beliefs and philosophies that it just makes it very rich and very, very beautiful. Why did you?
I think the important.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say. I think the important thing about it is, like to honor where one of the things I think has happened in the West in terms of new thought is that there's sort of this McDonaldization of everything. There's sort of, my friend calls it the one night stand of spiritual journeys. You can go to a weekend course and supposedly learn everything that you need to know about enlightenment. And what I find, and a lot of my book talks about, is the sort of depth that has been lost on what is a spiritual journey. What is your spirit? What does that mean to be on a spiritual journey? And it used to be, I talked about this in Killing Buddha, and I talked about it in Tipping Sacred Cows. It used to be that to go on a spiritual journey was a very personal, noble thing that you did. It was personal. And it wasn't something that you announced or wore on your sleeve or, talked about. And I look at somehow what it's come to in many ways here in the West. And I jokingly say, leave it to us to make it a romance novel about ourselves.
Yeah.
But if you look at the true spiritual journey, it's never ending, and it's deep, and it's something that you have to undertake over years and years and years and years and years of your life. It's not something you're ever going to get in a weekend seminar. And most of the people giving out weekend seminars are just repeating. One of the things I did when I got divorced is I threw out all of spirituality. I was sick of it. I was like, forget it. I'm going back to shoes. Like, that was easy. Right. And a friend of mine said, you ought to go back and just put down any book written before 1900. Or maybe even the 1920s, or back then, and go back and read. And one of the women that I read was an author named Vera Stanley Alder. And I think she was in the 1940s. And when I started to go back and read some of the older writings, I realized everything that we're talking about today is not new. And so, when you think about, when you go to that weekend seminar, that teaching is an ancient teaching. And when you can go back to the old text, so much more depth is in it that you realize, oh my God, I could never get this in a weekend.
Yeah, it's not the TV dinner, the instant version of spirituality.
No, exactly.
Absolutely. How did you choose to write a fictionalized version of your experiences rather than an autobiography?
Well, because I didn't want to piss people off. I mean, I already made, that's the God's honest truth. No, look, my Tipping Sacred Cows is more memoir. But, the thing that's important for everybody to know is that we all have perspectives, even in an experience. And so you and I are each having our own individual experience of this conversation. And if we were to sit down and describe our experience, they would be different, even though we're having everything that's quote the same that is happening to us. Mm-hmm. My takeaway from it and your takeaway from it are going to be extremely different. So I think it was really important to honor the people in my life, to write a novel, because then this is just, my interpretation, and it's fictionalized in a lot of ways. There's not every single character in this book is someone I know personally. The main characters are all based on people that I know, real people. But I wanted to have the freedom to have some fun with it and to take some liberties. And you can't do that in a memoir. And again, even when I read memoirs, I have to sit back and go, this is their story about it. So we have to, I wanted to honor that as too.
Your protagonist in Killing Buddha is Sarah. Where does Betsy end and Sarah begin?
I don't know that they do personally. Like in terms of exact events and how they all went down, there's a lot of differences. But for all intents and purposes, Sarah Wells is Betsy Chasse.
Hmm. There's a wonderful brief video on YouTube where you have a preview of Killing Buddha. Did you produce that?
I did. Produced it and directed it. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Some of the
Thank
lines
you.
in there are really, really hysterical. And how can people access that video? Where do they find that?
Go to my website, betsychasse.net. It's there.
Wonderful. And that's a great way to learn about what this is about and then really get your hands on the book and read the book, because it's really a wonderful read. I remember when my spiritual path reopened in my mid to late 30s, finding challenges with some of the information and teachings at the time. I attended the series of these Friday night gatherings. They used to call them salons at the home of this wonderful woman who was well into her 80s. And at the end of one of these evenings, she asked to speak with me. She said, I see that you seem to be disturbed by some of the information that's being shared. I just want to say something to you. And she shared something with me in a very motherly way that changed my life. She said, the divine, as we understand it, does not require that we be holy, but would love for us to be whole. From your experience, is embracing who we are and being whole unto ourselves our highest path?
Yes. You know, I talk a lot with my kids. It's interesting. I think I don't really care so much about how they do in school, whether or not they get, good grades in algebra. What I want them to walk away with is emotional intelligence and a clear sense of who they are and their own values and ethics. Because what I've learned is that if I can live from there and make decisions from there and contemplate from there, that's where I have all my peace. That's where, because, there's a myth that life is supposed to be perfect all the time and that we're supposed to be walking around wearing our little bliss glasses and everything is just, rainbows and moonbeams and all that stuff. The Jack Kerouac quote, be in love with your life, every detail of it. When I decided to take that on, I was in a really dark place in my life. That was right when I was getting divorced and I didn't know what was going to happen to me or my kids. And I thought, can I be in love with every detail of my life right now when it just sucks? Can I do that? And I found that I could do that when I was connected and acting from myself, who I truly am, and my own values and ethics. It helped me realize that it's not that it doesn't matter what's going on outside of me or in the world. There's still going to be stress. You're still going to have to pay the rent. You're still going to have an argument with your boyfriend, whatever it is. But just the way in which I can be in those moments is so much better when I'm connected to that place and that part of me.
Did you find in retrospect that this is something that I found personally? I had a first marriage also, and my marriage ended, of all things, because I was spiritually expanding and she was spiritually contracting. But I realized in retrospect that the whole purpose of that marriage, in addition to the experiences that I had, was the daughter that came through that marriage. Do you find that your kids are like the goal or the ultimate gold from your marriage?
I do and I don't. A lot of people will ask me this question, do I have any regrets? And I say no. Sure, do I wish I had said something differently? Do I wish I had acted differently? Well, sure, I can do that. But there's no growth in that. No human gets it right all the time. And so I look at everything that I've ever experienced in my life. When I decide to look back on it even and go, what did I gain from that personally? Like, what was the lesson there for me in that moment that I can take on to the next? Because so I look at life, this is the plane of experience. I don't think we're here to become levitating avatars and that we ascend and become masters. I've never met one. I know a lot of people that talk like they are, but believe me, they're not. I think we've been given a body. We've been given all these senses because we are here to experience life. And so I'm going to experience it. I go for it. And that means that the idea is if you can experience different aspects of life, you get the opportunity to take the wisdom from it. So yes, my children are a great gift. They're also, believe me, great teachers. They're part of my experience of learning. But there was so much from my marriage and my ending of my marriage that I learned from as well.
Absolutely. If you had a message that the one thing that you can impart to them today that would resonate with them for the rest of their lives, what would you tell them?
Well, I have one daughter and I have one son, and I would probably tell them this every single day, which is what we just talked about. Live from your value, know who you are, live from your values and your ethics, and don't be an asshole.
Wonderful. My guest is Betsy Chasse. We're talking about her new book, Killing Buddha. We'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
So I'm a cat. And I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living. A chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Betsy Chasse. We're talking about her book, Killing Buddha. Let's talk about some of your other books. What inspired Metanoia?
So Metanoia was a fluke. I had been told, I never thought I was a writer. You know, it's funny because when I got hired to make What the Bleep, first I was hired as a line producer. Then with working with Will and Mark, I became a producer. And then I became a writer, director, producer because I started to contribute so much to the creative aspects of the film. But I'd always been a technical producer, and I never really thought I was a writer or very creative. And so when I got divorced and I threw everything out, I started journaling just as a way to process my own feelings and what I was going through. And I was working with a client who needed to, at that time, ebooks were becoming all the rage. And this self-publishing was becoming a thing. And she wanted to do this book. And I needed to learn how to do the book physically, like take text and put it in the format, all that stuff. And so my friend who was helping me said, well, do you have anything that you've been writing? I'm like, well, I have all these journals. I mean, these little essays I've been writing. She said, well, just give me those and I'll figure something out. And she read them and she said, these are amazing. And she put them into the book. And I decided to call it Metanoia. And I thought, I'll just throw it out in the world and see if people laugh at me and I never write again or what happens. And I put it out and it did very well. And that was the beginning of me going, maybe I'm a writer.
Absolutely. What about tipping sacred cows?
You know, tipping sacred cows, again, started with me just writing. You know, you talk about having that, those existential crises where you begin to question everything that you thought you knew, right? And so, again, I'm divorced, I'm going broke. I got 2 kids to take care of by myself. And I really, really started to question everything about spirituality, the law of attraction, meditating. Do I create my reality? Like all of the stuff that I've spent the previous 10 years yammering on about. And that's when I went back and started reading all the old texts. And I started to write down from my own perspective what my new takeaways were. Like, for instance, what is the law of attraction really? Like, it's not that you sit on a cushion and meditate and a Mercedes comes flying out of your ass. Like, there's way more to it than that, right? There's a chapter in Tipping Sacred Cows called Who is the Universe and Why Do They Have All My Stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is this ego and why are we trying to kill it? Right? Like, why is everybody running around saying kill the ego? What did I learn about that? And so I started to write all that down. And Simon & Schuster, the Atria people were like, we love what you're writing. Let's put it into a book. And so that was my first, quote, big book deal. I love the medium of writing. I love the medium of story filmmaking, but filmmaking is such a big undertaking. And it's such a collaborative undertaking. And the world of filmmaking has shifted dramatically. I love where it is now. I think it's much more, it's blessing and a curse in that it's so much more accessible to anybody can become a filmmaker. It's also a curse in that anybody can become a filmmaker. But I just realized, like, you get to a point where I had so explored that medium in so many ways that I just began to really fall in love with the solitude and the deeper connection I had with myself when I was writing.
Beautiful. In 2019, you released the documentary filmmaking masterclass. What do you offer aspiring filmmakers in the book?
So that book is really more of a business, like the business of filmmaking. Because one of the things that I've learned, I spent a lot of time with young filmmakers who everybody and their brother decided to go out and make a movie. And I would often get calls with somebody who had mortgaged their house and were in debt and had this, 800 hours of footage that they didn't know what to do with. And I realized that I wanted to create a book that would get to them before that point. So it's not a technical book. You're not going to learn too much about cameras and things like that. It's really explores the what I call the 5 W's of filmmaking: who, what, when, where, and why. Like, why are you making this movie? Who's going to watch the movie? This stuff that people need to be doing before they go out and make a film, because it's a big deal. And most films don't make any money, especially documentaries. You hear about the ones that do, but 99.9% of documentaries made don't ever get seen and don't make any money. And a lot of people will put their entire lives on the block for it and then realize, shoot, I shouldn't have done that. So I wanted to give people sort of an education around the business of filmmaking before they got into too much trouble. And I used to teach master students filmmaking, and and even in the university level, I found that there was a lot of time spent on the technical aspects of making films, but not enough spent on the psychological. At that time, the class was called the psychology of producing. So there wasn't enough spent in that aspect of it in terms of what does it take to make a film.
You partnered with Debbie Spector Weissman on It Came Out of My Vagina, Now What? How was that book received?
People love that book. That was a compilation book we have a bunch of different moms writing all of our stories about parenting. And that book came about because Debbie's a dear friend of mine, and we were sitting around one day lamenting like how horrifying it is to be a mother today, because you're constantly bombarded with information that tells you that you're screwing it up, right? And that you've just basically, every time you turn around, you read an article and you're like, shoot, I've totally traumatized my child here. I've totally traumatized my child there, so to speak. And we just thought, God, moms need the counter to that, that moms need the counter to the Dr. Sears book, right? So we just decided to have some fun. And again, it goes back to my personal idea which is like, I have a motto: if I can make one person smile a day, I'm doing good in the world. And I just wanted to give moms a little peace and a little like, oh, I'm not alone. And so that's really what that book is about. And I think Debbie and I were drinking a bunch of wine, and I think she said, or maybe Straw, I can't remember if it was her or her husband or one of us, somebody said, whoa, we just popped out of the vagina. And that was the name of the book.
And what about those who've had C-sections?
I had 2 C-sections. So technically I didn't even pop kids out of my vagina, but I still think it counts.
That's wonderful. What experience would you like readers to take away from Killing Buddha?
I would like people to laugh a little bit. The feedback that I've been getting is interesting, because there's people that have been doing the spiritual journey stuff for years and years and years. And what I enjoy that they say about is that oftentimes people will write books or make movies about people on spiritual journeys, and it's super filled with cliches. And you can tell by watching that they've never actually done a fire walk, right? They've never been into any of the Esalen or any of these places. And so it has this sort of like inauthenticity to it. And so you can't laugh. Whereas the journey that Sarah goes on, everything in that book I've done. And so I'm laughing at it from the insider view, and it gave the readers permission to laugh at the ridiculous things we do sometimes in order to, quote, be enlightened. So to have some fun and to laugh, and like you said earlier, not take things so darn seriously. And then the other piece that people are getting that I really wanted is that, you're okay. Like, it's going to be okay. And that whatever you're doing exactly what you need to be doing. And there is no rules. There's no, you've got to do this kind of yoga. You've got to carry that kind of crystal. If you're not wearing this kind of, tachyton, whatever necklace, and you haven't meditated, you meditated for 12 minutes instead of 15. Like, there's no rules around any of this stuff. And so to just sort of let go of that, kill all those Buddhas, and just go back to the basics, which is what's in your heart.
Yeah. I had a wonderful teacher and mentor who used to say, everything is unfolding in divine order. Do you sense that?
I do. I have a really hard time with that sometimes, but yes, I do. Yeah. I share a funny story about that. My son loves to collect Pokemon cards. And by the way, if anybody has, Pokemon and some of these anime, they're kind of dark. I'm not going to lie. It's a little rough and dark out there. But the spiritual, deep, meaningful concepts that are in some of this stuff is kind of mind-blowing. But anyway, he collects Pokemon cards. And sometimes we get up really early because they'll release a new Pokemon deck, and you got to get to the store before anybody else does. And it's a whole thing, right? So we got up early one morning. We went running to the store, and there was this huge line, and he didn't get the deck, and he was really frustrated about it. And I said to him, well, you just have to trust in faith. Have some faith that it's all for, there's something greater that's going to show up. And so he was bummed. And so later that day I said, hey, why don't we pop over to Barnes & Noble and just have a look around? Because P and I love to go wander through Barnes & Noble. We pop over to Barnes & Noble, and just at that moment, they had restocked the shelves with this other thing that he had been waiting for months for, that he had let go of ever getting. And there it was. And he looked at me and he said, oh my God, I wanted this more than that other thing. And if I had bought that other thing, I wouldn't have had the money to buy this. And this is what I've been waiting for. And I said, see, everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. What's next for Betsy Chasse?
Gosh, I have no idea. I tend to do things and then take a break. I mean, I'm really excited about the streaming platform, See Good TV. I love doing that. I love curating. It's called See Good TV, where we're the streaming platform for consciously curated entertainment. I love finding gems of films and podcasts and shorts and streaming them on that platform. I'm so loving that right now. I will be writing a third book. I haven't even started it yet, but I know it's going to be called 50 Shades of What the Fuck. And it's about what life in the 50s, but I have to get deeper into my 50s to get there. But that and parenting and being in love with my life, every detail of it.
Absolutely. My guest, Betsy Chasse, she's the author of the new book, Killing Buddha, The Truth Shall Set You Free, but first it'll make you miserable. Betsy, please tell our listeners how they can get your books and find out more about you and everything that you do.
Well, thank you so much. You can find me at betsychasse.net. You can always find me on Facebook and Instagram as @BetsyChasse. And you can Google me. I'm sure I'm somewhere. I hope I don't show up where I shouldn't, but I probably will.
Betsy, thank you so much for joining us and bringing smiles to all of our faces, because you absolutely did, and everything that you do in this world. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.